Hello, my name is Julian Bauer, and I'm the author of historical novels dealing with faith and reason. John Paul II said that faith and reason are like two wings on which the human spirit rises to the contemplation of truth. In our first session, we examined how faith drives the human spirit towards truth. In this session, we will discuss how reason helps us find and contemplate truth. Faith is nothing more than trust in authority, something heard and believed, and it is used every single day by each one of us. On the other hand, reason is the mental process concerned with forming conclusions, judgments, or inferences. We can search for truth using our reasoning ability in several different ways. We can reason objectively, subjectively, analytically, scientifically, deductively, inductively, or abductively. For example, deductive reasoning is the form of logic in which statements or premises are thought to be true and in which the conclusion necessarily follows. Most scientific exploration follows this line of reasoning. For example, if noble gases, that is, chemically inactive gases, are stable and neon is a noble gas, then neon is stable. It is a true conclusion because the premises are proven true. Inductive reasoning is the form of logic in which the conclusion, though supported by the premises, does not follow from them necessarily. A certain amount of guessing is necessary. For example, supposing I had 100 pennies. I put aside 20 pennies and studied them. I found that all had Lincoln heads. From this I concluded that all 100 pennies had Lincoln heads. It is entirely possible that one of the 90 unstudied pennies had an Indian head on it. Inductive reasoning looks at patterns, while deductive reasoning looks at facts. Abductive reasoning is a sort of logical inference which starts with a set of observations from which one seeks to find the simplest and most likely explanations for the observations. We infer the conclusion from what we are able to observe. Often this type of logic is expressed in such terms as best available or most likely conclusion. If a baby cries and we smell something awful, we might assume that the baby needs a changing. However, it could be that there is another reason why the baby cries. Still, our first impression, and the most likely to be true, is that the baby needs changing. That's abductive reasoning. And then there is penguin reasoning. If all old television shows are black and white, and all penguins are black and white, then some penguins are old television shows. That's terrible logic. Sometimes it's the type of logic that religious people are unjustly accused of using. One can search for truth through objective or subjective reasoning. That is, by either focusing on the things external to the mind or by reasoning through the use of the intellect alone. Subjective reasoning, reasoning through one's intellect alone, is usually hampered by a tendency to form syllogisms to prove a point. Trying to explain the picture in one's mind through the use of words is difficult because words have different meanings to different people, or they may not fully explain the picture intended to be transmitted. We often hear someone tell us, just trust me on this. That type of trust requires a strong faith in the authority expounding the information. Is it possible to find authority that exists outside of our material world, that transcends our senses, using reason alone and following philosophical lines of thought, using nothing but the things found in nature and in nature's laws? Many Christians believe it is not only possible, but that it has been done through a line of thought called objective analytical reasoning. For example, Aristotle analyzed patterns found in nature, In nature, all things change. Change is the actualization of potential. If all things change because of their potential to change, something must initiate change. Initially is something which can actualize potential without itself being actualized. An unmoved mover, as Aristotle named such a being. Other philosophers followed Aristotle, developing the line of reasoning called natural theology. Edward Fesser, in his book, Five Proofs of the Existence of God, provides a detailed explanation on the use of objective analytical reasoning. One might object to the Aristotelian line of reasoning by saying, if everything has a cause, what caused God? But no Aristotelian philosopher ever said that everything has a cause. What the Aristotelians say is that everything which has in its nature a potential to change requires a cause to activate that potential. They then argue that there must be a first mover without potential, and that unmoved mover is called, for lack of a better word, God. An unbeliever might facetiously ask, if God is all powerful, can God create a stone that is too heavy for him to lift? Or can he create a squared circle? But if there is a God, he doesn't create self-contradictory things. Things are the way he creates them. It is a silly argument. A more serious argument is how, if God's nature is all good, and he cannot create something not in his nature, how and why would he create the evil that exists in the world? Well, what is good and what is bad? A perfect triangle would have 180 degrees and three sides, a good triangle. If it had something other than that, it would not be a good triangle, but rather an imperfect one. A broken triangle with pieces like a jigsaw puzzle would not be a good triangle, although the parts are good. So perhaps God created a world with rational beings capable of choosing good and rejecting evil. Every jigsaw piece, or being, is good in and of itself. Perhaps evil is simply the absence of good, a challenge to rational beings to make the right decision, to do the right thing, the good thing. The atheist Alex Rosenberg wrote a book in which he said that physics is the whole truth about reality. He said, using the methods of physics, we can acquire all knowledge. He said, everyone who disagrees with his proposition and engages in metaphysics is engaging in self-deception. Rosenberg would probably agree with those who say metaphysics is filling in the gaps of science with a heavenly being, a God of the gaps. Yet, scientists cannot reason their way to the metaphysical using the rules of their profession. They are limited to consideration of physics. However, unlike scientists, philosophers have the tools to reason their way beyond physics to the metaphysics. Crossing that delineating line between physical and metaphysical reality, one may dive into thousands of fields of religious interest using faith or reason or both. One's fields of metaphysical knowledge are limited only by his or her personal interest. Most personal lines of understanding will be short, almost non-existent, but others may be long and scholarly. Let's remind ourselves about the nature of reason. Reason is the mental process concerned with forming conclusions, judgments, or inferences. We may reason subjectively or objectively, or both at the same time. Subjectivism is the doctrine that all knowledge is limited to experience by the self, and that transcendent knowledge is impossible. Seeing is believing puts a limitation on our reasoning power, as does any insistence that Christians prove every bit of their faith through scientific or deductive reasoning. All of the facts regarding metaphysics cannot be known until death, assuming that there is a life after death. It's illogical to think otherwise. Nevertheless, both natural theology and revealed theology use objective elements to reason to God and his attributes. Natural theology uses the objects of nature, for example, by recognizing that all material things have a beginning and an ending. Revealed theology uses the objective elements of scriptures and tradition. Neither natural nor revealed theology depend on subjective reasoning alone or one's own experiences to develop trust or faith. Christians believe that divine revelation is God communicating with man. Scriptures offer early witness to the message of Christ, and tradition helps the faithful to understand the core values within Scriptures. We are rational beings. We have an intellect and a will. Christians can improve their intellect and will by the exchange of ideas between lively minds, as John Henry Newman once said. We have inquisitive, restless minds. Christians know that superstition and gullibility are traits they may be accused of. They know that others do not trust God's revelation to a human writer, and therefore Christians must find additional sources to trust, and they find them in tradition. Only through both faith and reason can Christians take that leap of faith into the arms of hope. The search for truth will never end. Christians believe that only God is pure truth and worthy of complete trust. The philosopher Martin Heidegger suggests that reason is the adversary of thinking. By this he means that while reason is the limit of the human intellect's power, it cannot restrict what the human mind may reasonably consider. We can think about an angel even though we have no experiences on which to base our reasoning or belief in such a being. Scientific or deductive reasoning are fine for things of this material world. But we should not forget that searches for truth also occur, even in this world, through inductive or abductive reasoning, or simply faith or trust in what one hears. Many Christians believe that moral and religious truths will fall under the province of an informed conscience far more than the intellect. Sometimes we just know something is wrong, even when the Supreme Court says it is right. It is faith in a higher authority that Christians find to be reasonable. While Christians believe that scriptures provide truth through objective reasoning of core understandings, it is through tradition that those core values are maintained. Tradition is like a white picket fence protecting the house, a house whose homeowner expects the groundskeepers to use their brains, their reasoning ability, to maintain the fence by washing, painting, and repairing it, perhaps even putting bushes in front of it to make it more attractive, to maintain it, constantly changing it, keeping it perfect by bouncing ideas off lively minds, as John Henry Newman said. To sum up, a Christian uses the gifts he's been given. He doesn't leave his brains at the door of his church when he goes to worship. A Christian brings his faith and reason, his religious knowledge, his trust, to share in the communal liturgy and prayer. In session 3, we'll try to answer Pontius Pilate's question when he confronted Jesus and asked, "What is truth?" We will learn how the combination of faith and reason lead us to the contemplation of truth. Oh, by the way, if you are interested in one of my published books, you can find them on Amazon.com. Thanks for listening.